Hey guys, my name's Khadroth, and today we're going to be talking about a video that I did last year around this time, talking about what FGO can do to improve for the year. We're actually going to be revisiting all the stuff that I said that they needed to do last year and grading them on that, and then we're also going to be talking about what I think they need to do coming up for 2023. As we get into this, let's again start by taking a look here at the first one. And you can see the first thing I had on the list was that servant coins should become acquirable from events. As you guys know, servant coin system was already in place as of New Year's last year, and we had just gotten the pity system. So that was essentially a huge thing on everybody's mind already. Even back then, the system had only been out for, roughly 6 months, but people were still up in arms about this already. The fact remains is the devs have actually talked about this. They addressed it back at Ani 7, where Mr. 2 said that while they're happy with the implementation of the grailing to 120 and the append systems, that they did understand that people felt like the system itself with regards to the coins was not implemented correctly. They have said that they are going to address this, but they also did say that they're not really sure how they're going to address it. So I'm not sure if that means that it wasn't ever in their plans or they're just playing dumb to try and stall for time, but either one of those is not really a good thing. So I will say that is an indication that there will be a fix, but they didn't fix it for the entirety of last year. So they've now gone a year and a half without addressing this issue really, other than in an interview. As a result of this, a change could be coming in the future, but it's definitely something they're going to need to do for the next year, but they get basically a failing grade for this one. They did address it, they are aware of it, but they haven't done anything for it. And my next one here was that pity shouldn't reset. A big chunk about why this was an issue last year is because the pity system, I think a lot of people would say, is too high. For me personally, I don't feel like the amount is too high. I feel like players just themselves need to change how they think about pity because they're not used to having it in FGO. Saving up for the units that you actually want will allow you to use the pity, and that's where the sort of big disconnect with a lot of people happens. So I don't think the amount of the pity is the issue. Instead, I actually think that the amount of the pity is okay due to how much they give out free currency for you guys. So unless you want them to change how much that happens, you probably don't want them to change the pity amount, because that'll just cause them to totally readjust the entire game's reward schemes. But now my issue with it is more that the pity system itself is pretty bare bones. There's not a whole lot of bells and whistles that maybe other pity systems in other games have. And so as we look at FGO's pity system, instead what I end up seeing is sort of this deal where basically anytime you would ever have banner rotation, the pity itself would reset. And that causes problems. That's caused all of our banner structure to get changed post pity system. In fact, NA is going through this right now, where we're looking at them adjusting a whole year's worth of banners that never would have been adjusted otherwise because we got pity early. So we're starting to see them change banners for, frankly, the worse in many cases. Some people like it because it allows them to get a solo rate up for a lot of the SSRs that they want, but this causes some issues with regards to maybe other units, particularly the 4 stars that would be on rate up with your 5-star. So as you start to look at that, especially with regards to something like summer, it becomes really hairy. This year for summer on JP, they actually did address it by basically giving every single SSR its own banner paired with one SR. I don't think they're necessarily going to be able to do that for the current gap year that they're having on NA, and that's going to be a little bit of an issue then, because it means that you're just going to be having to roll for multiple rate ups of 4 stars, which causes all sorts of issues. That reason is why they just adjusted the 4-star rate up rate on FGO for the first time. We've seen it now go from 1.5% chance of rolling the SR rate up to now a 2.1% chance. And that is largely the reason. And it does change as well for multiple rate ups. So I think they realized that's one of the big knocks against the pity system, and they tried to deal with it. It doesn't. It helps. It definitely is a nice thing, but it's not going to make people not get angry about banner structure because of how they've changed this. So this is why I say that pity shouldn't reset when a banner changes. If that happens, if your pity count is preserved, then all of a sudden you don't care what the rotations are, and you can just roll the days you want at the times you want. That makes it a lot better. I think there's also other bells and whistles they could put in here. Something like, again, I don't know, the ability to preserve it on certain units or something. So let's say you go out there and you try to roll Morgan Le Fay and you don't get her. You only get like 600, you know, rolls into the 900 roll pity. And then all of a sudden you start going like, well, okay, but I guess I lose it. That sucks. You know, I think they probably want you to just go all out and buy a pack, but a lot of players, if you're free to play especially, just don't. And so they'll just end up losing that pity progress. Whereas I think if they allowed that pity progress to be preserved either on that unit on its next banner, where like here comes another Morgan Le Fay banner a couple months later and you're already 600 of the way there, that would be good. Or they could just make it almost like a Genshin type system where it just doesn't reset ever. So that's 600 progress towards the next pity, whatever it is, and regardless of the banner ending or not, it maybe carries over. That would be another good thing, because that at least allows you to bank progress towards the things that you want. And again, unlike Genshin system, it's not artificially deflated so that the rate stays low all the time. You still have the normal chance of rolling the unit regardless of when you're rolling. But we'll see. Right now they haven't decided that they need to address that other than the 4-star rate. So for now, this gets kind of a like C grade for me. It's somewhere in the middle where they did something. It does help things. I'm not sure it's enough though. That FP should be faster to roll out. This one's another big one for me because basically the Grail casting system comes out right before right with Tunguska. And essentially I have been doing it every single month on JP since it came out. Very quickly, my JP account ran out of servant coins from the 3-star and lower units, because that's the majority of where you're going to get those coins. It's going to be from your FP rolling. Now, my JP account is not a very robust account. It's a very cheap to play, almost free to play type account, and that's how I try to run it, is with that free to play mentality. So as a result, I didn't have this gigantic horde of servant coins going into this, and so I ran out, you know, within about 2-3 months. Since that time, I have had to every single month at the beginning of the month when it resets, roll out enough FP to be able to print 2 grails a month. And that is a lot. It takes a long time to do. That is easily the most tedious thing, and I hate it. It is probably my #1 complaint in FGO right now in terms of quality of life that the game needs. Nobody should be having to go through this. I understand by the time NA gets to this point, people will have just vast hordes of servant coins piled up, and that's perfectly fine. But let me tell you what, for the people that don't, for the people that run out, especially if they want those grails, that becomes a huge issue. That becomes a very annoying thing for them to do every single month, and it doesn't reflect well on FGO. So ultimately, I think this is a good thing for both free-to-plays and whales alike, because a lot of the times whales have a huge quantity of FP saved up, and then they hit a time where there's like 2 to 3 times super success rate, or a time where it's just really good to make craft essence bombs, and they want to roll out a bunch too. And it is just cumbersome and time consuming to do. So I think this is one of the areas, just like with rolling out your lotto boxes, where they could easily up this and make it a lot better. Sadly, again, they haven't addressed it the entire time, so they get a failing grade on this one for me. The fact that they still, after years, have not realized how tedious it is to roll out your FP in this game. Quick needs more support options. They did address this. They did give us both Summer Scotty at Summer, and they also talked about it in the Ani7 interview that this year they're going to try to address Quick. So we know this is something that they're focusing on. I'm going to give them something like a B on this for right now, because they have done stuff. It's not enough. Quick still needs some low star options for support, especially something like a Shakespeare, something like a Mozart or anything like that, that's actually a Quick devoted support unit. But while we did get again the Yellow Turban caster, and we did get Summer Scotty, it's still not enough. They've just got to do a little bit more, and then I think Quick will be in a much better place. I do remember talking to people when Summer Scotty came out, and they were really of the opinion that she didn't do much. She didn't move the bar too much. I am of the opposite opinion. I think she actually really helps. It's just not very apparent how she does. But what she allows you to do is basically address the one big issue that Quick had, which was dealing with weird structured nodes. Not your 3-3x type of node, but instead you're like 1-2x or your 2-1x or your 1-1x type of node. Summer Scotty allows you to have 2 different cards in a Quick units deck that you're able to crit with. And so you can pick one of those waves that you maybe got all the cards with, stagger those cards, or maybe take out the single enemy using only your crits, and just be able to kind of blow the whole wave away that way. So it allows you to basically take one of those turns and not have to NP on it, thus making Quick a lot more speedy and a lot more capable of not having to deal with the refund issue that it naturally has. So I think it's good for them. Obviously it still has to deal with RNG, but she does move the bar in that sense, and it's why I'm actually a proponent of having both Scotties, not just the one, even though I think there is an argument to be made about Summer Scotty being a little bit better in terms of kit. Still, like I said, they've done a little bit there, so I'm okay with it. The mix and match, Ascension, and NP animations. This one's kind of a weird request for me. This is something that I think that they need to do just in general, because I see a lot of people griping and moaning over the years about how, you know, they like Ascension 2 of a unit, but they like the Noble Phantasm from Ascension 1 or Ascension 3, and they can't quite get the exact thing that they want. I think that sprite work is a lot harder than people realize, especially when people are demanding costumes, or people are demanding, like, why can't I just get this version without the cape, without the helmet, without whatever? And so people don't realize that they have to go back in there and animate every single thing by hand each time they make any sort of little adjustment. So I understand that it's not as easy as people say, but I think this would be a relatively easy one, because this one can be done mostly on the coding side of things, where you just say, hey, look, we are just going to detach the coupling of this Noble Phantasm from this Ascension and just let you use them in whichever order you want. So that would be another way to add a little bit of customization to the unit and make the unit feel like it's really your own variant and not just the exact same as someone else's. Obviously there would be some fan favorites, but still I think that would be another cool way that they could just add a little bit of depth with probably not too much dev work on their end, especially on the animation department's end. Faux pas print acquisition should be doubled. We actually saw a time period last year where they did give out a decent chunk of faux pas prints all of a sudden as part of a campaign, and during that time I actually felt like that was the best that faux pas prints had ever been, because all of a sudden you got a decent influx and it sped it up quite a bit. That to me is the issue with faux pas prints. They are primarily on the devs end designed to be, yeah, hey, here's another thing that we can give you to customize your favorite unit, but it's their goal with that is primarily for it to be a QP sync. The reason faux pas prints fail at that is because they are so slowly given out, they can't really sync your QP. You only get the one a week unless you're a whale buying them with rare prisms. And that is the only adjustment that they gave it. They upped the amount that you can buy in the rare prism shop because they ultimately looked at that and realized even the amount you could buy wasn't worth it. So I think that's the problem that they're having here, is they just need to increase the rate at which you get them. Honestly, you could tout it as an upgrade to the login streak, or you could hide it in events or campaigns or whatever. But the faux pas print acquisition should at least be doubled, and honestly, it can be quadrupled. So they get a failing grade on this one for me, mostly because they had an idea to do it and they pulled it back. They didn't do anything else like that ever again. So I think that's a bad take on their part. Faux pas prints should, in my opinion, be at least as common to get as gold foes, and yet they take you 2.5 years to finish a unit just off the normal logins, versus gold foes you can complete a unit in about 9 months without buying it from the rare prism shop. So there is a wholly different scale there where faux pas are basically 3 times the amount. And that's what I'm saying. I don't think they would break it even if they quadrupled it. So I'd like to see them adjust that. That 4-star ticket should return. It's their first passing grade right here. They get an A+. They brought back the 4-star ticket last year. That is definitely one of the things I harped on them for, and it's definitely something they need to keep doing into the future. I talked about this before, and I had, some mixed sort of responses where people were saying, well, Cad, they don't need to bring 4-star tickets back. They've already given us 5-star tickets. And I pointed out that the 4-star ticket is more valuable than you realize. mostly because there are some decently annoying units to get in there, especially the story logs, and sometimes the 4-star units are people's favorites. So I think the community really appreciated the 4-star ticket. I understand that they didn't give it to us during the time period of giving us a 5-star ticket because, yeah, the 5-star ticket's just better. But I think looking at that, there's a lot of people that still really liked and desired the 4-star ticket. So it was an easy sort of win for them from a developer standpoint for getting in the good graces of the community. So I'm happy to see them bring it back after years of it not being there. I think that's a good thing. I think that was a great move. They need to keep doing it. If they want to spice it up in the future, maybe considering putting some limited units or something like that in it. I think you could get a long way with the community if you do that, but still really, really nice to see them bring that one back. We need actual account-based security options. We started to see as they've actually worked some with a little bit Google and Apple on this, but I don't think that's the solution. I don't want to see an app store solution. I want an actual single account for my account. That way, if I'm ever transferring from one device to another, from one app store to another, I'm not going to lose my progress. I'm not going to lose any money that I've spent on my account. I'm not going to lose my hard-earned hours and time spent investing in this game. I think the fact that we are in year 7 going on year 8 of this game and we still don't have something that literally every other gacha game has at this point is ridiculous. I understand the point of transfer codes. I understand that it does help people use it on emulators and stuff like that, but holy cow, I don't think it is ever worth losing a single other account ever again, because I think that is the fastest way for your community to disconnect and say, I lost my account, fuck it, I'm not playing this game anymore. So I think that is a huge issue for them and something that they just need to address from both a security standpoint and a liability standpoint from their player base. You don't want to be bleeding out concurrent players like that. That is the worst way to lose them. Upgrades for both old welfares and summer units. Again, this one's going to be a passing grade, at least for right now. This is something that they really need to keep doing. They've gotten an A+ on this to me because they actually did give some welfare some upgrades this past year. They actually did give some summer units some upgrades. Keep doing it. Stop ignoring some of the favorite units in the game. People love the summer units. There are people that love the welfares as well. I think when you don't upgrade these units and you don't keep them up with the rest of the roster and the power creep just continues, you're only just naturally going to piss people off. You're only going to make them feel like you don't care about them or their favorite unit. So please keep doing this, Single. I think this is a great job that you have done this past year. Keep it forward into 2023. That is all I ask. That is something that you need to keep doing, and you need to really address the roster as a whole, which I'll talk about on the next slide. The bond Cs need to be improved. This is another interesting one. They actually addressed this. They talked about this during the Annie 7 interview, and it's I gotta give props to the interviewer. That interviewer is amazing, and he is absolutely on our side because he knew to ask that question. He basically proposed to him, hey, what are you guys doing with bond Cs? They're kind of lackluster at this point. And they are. Bond Cs have a couple notable examples where they are good to use, but I would argue that 95% of them at least are terrible, and you should never put them on. And the reason for that is because basically, while the effects might look good in some cases, ultimately they just pale in comparison to an actual 5-star craft essence. A lot of the times those 5-star craft essences are all attack scaling, they have starting charge, they have, you know, just loads of damage, more potential in that, and that's why you're going to use them. So I think looking at the bond Cs, they look really lackluster now in the grand scheme of things, and really only like your support bond craft essences, and then, you know, the couple notable examples like Herc or Georgios and stuff like that. Those are the ones that actually get taken. Everybody else just doesn't. And the reason those get taken is because either their effect is so good that it cannot be ignored because it tangibly changes the way the unit is played, or it's a support unit and you didn't quite care what the support unit had on it in that situation, so you took it to boost the party's performance. That's why those get taken. I think an easy way to address this would be to just simply give Bond craft essences some stats. Again, it doesn't need to be 2000 attack, but it could be. You could do 2000 attack and 2000 HP. That would immediately make Bond C's really worth it in some cases. And then you could also sit there and go, hey, you know, maybe just 1000. That would be fine as well. One of the other solutions that, honestly, I'm going to give credit to my chat for proposing this on Twitch. They have actually said, they're like, hey, what if you made the Bond craft essence a passive? So that once you had earned it, once you had unlocked it, or maybe later down the line with a Bond 15 or even a Bond 20, you could sit there and you could go, hey, now it's a passive. Now it's part of the unit. You don't have to have the craft essence anymore. It's just always there. In some cases, I think that would be really OP, a la Herc. If you look at him and having his Bond C permanently as a passive, that would make Herc really, really nutty. Especially because that would allow him to just take any other craft essence on top of that. So there would be a huge doubling up effect there. But I think for the vast majority of units, that would definitely be a workable solution for them, and they would now just become even better thanks to you having that. So I think that's something they could work in. But based off the interview and what Mr. 2 said, all he gave us was that, yes, they're aware of this, and that he can't say anything yet, but that you should try to get as many units as you can to Bond 10. Try to get as many units as you can to unlock their Bond craft essence. So again, I'm not going to tell you that they fixed this in the last year. They definitely haven't, but I am going to give them a passing grade on this one. They are going to get a C because it looks like not only do they know of the issue, and not only do they already have a plan in the works, but they can't talk about it just yet. So it looks like they are headed towards, yes, we are fixing it and we know how, versus the coin system where, again, I give them a failing grade because it's been the #1 issue for the community for over a year and a half now, and they are claiming they don't know how to fix it right now, which is ridiculous to me. That's their entire job as a dev. So again, I'm going to be really happy to see that one get addressed in the future. Fine-tuning the support system in friends list. This was a rather weak request of me, but I think I see all the time, basically people having weirdness with their supports where they either don't load out their support lists or they don't put up a lot of craft essences, or maybe they have struggling issues with like, basically, you know, what unit do they put up? We saw times in the past where like we had moon cancers that were never getting put up and stuff like that because there just weren't the slots. So I think the #1 thing I want to see here is that, again, that they basically give us more extra slots, because I think that's a big issue nowadays, where even though we have the 3 support lists, it's entirely possible that you can't cover all the extra classes because you've got 4 classes just kind of lumped into, actually I say 4, you've got 6 classes lumped into 1 slot, which is not great. I think that is something where they at least need to give us maybe a second extra slot on the list, but I understand that would be changing the UI and it would maybe not be the greatest. So they did address this at least a little bit though. They made it so that now there's no more issue, and this was another one of my issues here. Another issue was not being able to use a non-friends NP. And I actually proposed, hey, what if they allowed you to maybe use a command seal so that if you had to take a non-friends NP or non-friends unit and you wanted to use their MP, you still could. And so that was the issue there, is that sometimes you were just looking for the right unit and you couldn't find the right combination of like craft essence in an event with the right unit for bonus, and then finally you'd find one but it wasn't your friend, and so using it in the node made it annoying because you couldn't use the Noble Phantasm in any way. And that's why I proposed, hey, give us a command spell where now we can just at least pay to unlock that. It wouldn't be the greatest, you could only do it so much, but it would at least alleviate that in a like emergency type of situation. They addressed this totally though, and that's why they're going to basically get another passing grade from me right here. They just made it so that now anyone, you can use their Noble Phantasm. They do not have to be your friends. And in a weird way, that almost invalidates the friends list mechanic entirely. And that's why I'm not going to give them an A+ here, because I think that's kind of short-sighted, but it's still largely okay. And the reason for this is because naturally you still want a robust and good friends list, because they're the people that show up every time. So even if you can use a random's unit and still use their NP, there's no guarantee that the random units that are showing up for you are good. So it's one of the reasons why, yeah, it does kind of invalidate that issue with the friends list, but the friends list is still important to you regardless. So I do like that. I think that's a good fix because it basically just got rid of the whole issue entirely. Better interaction with the community. Oh boy, they get a nice big fat F for this. And they're going to keep getting a big fat F for this until they do more. Honestly, they have addressed this some. I could maybe give them a D instead of an F, but I think the point here is that they need to kind of get this moniker to know that they're not doing enough with the community. A big chunk about why that is because they're just sort of always going radio silent, and for basically months on end, about 2 times a year typically, we get to actually hear from the devs. It doesn't mean that they don't do live streams and stuff to announce events, but we rarely get beyond the marketing to actually hear what the issues are and what's going on with them. And it's only from the occasional interviews that they give out every year. In fact, one of the best things that they have done for the NA side of things is the Chaldea Break Room. And while I do like that, oftentimes we're interviewing a random artist and stuff like that, and yeah, it's still interesting to read about. I do highly recommend you guys go read through those because it's one of the ways in which I kind of get a feel for how they're functioning behind the scenes. But it doesn't really tell me what's going on in their head, what the current issue is within the company. Are they pressed for time? Are they short-staffed? That sort of stuff. And I know that they're probably never going to talk about that, but I think largely there are typically some issues that the community has from time to time that just never get addressed. And I think this is something that they could benefit from if they actually took, say, the dev diaries that they have been not consistently doing, and 1, made them consistent because they're a good idea, and 2, added maybe an extra minute or 2 where they answer, you know, maybe just a handful of frequently asked questions submitted by the community. Again, it doesn't have to be a, hey, they have to answer every community question. Obviously, there's going to be some things that they just can't talk about. But I think there are some very easy ones where they can take the sentiment or the spirit of the question and say, like, look, let's address this. So again, you know, like, why is it taking so long to get a story chapter out? Why is there maybe like a delay? Why did we design a unit this way? Why have we not addressed this unit's upgrades? That sort of thing. I think you could get a lot of info from maybe just anywhere from 3 to 5 questions getting answered in one of those dev interviews. That'd be an easy PR tactic for them, and it would work really well. There would be people that would naturally, I'd say, bristle at some of the responses that the devs might give, but largely, unless the dev response is totally tone deaf, I think you're going to be fine and people are going to understand. A lot of people want to root for the devs here, and it's only by virtue of the fact that we never hear from them that it becomes hard for them to do so. So I think their communication has got to get a lot better. There's plenty of gacha games out there where the dev is just terrible at communicating. Don't be one of those. Be better. That's all I ask, Lasingle. And then that the rate of main story should be increased. This is the #1 issue, I think, for longevity and sort of popularity of the game. I think now that we have a pity system, that issue in and of itself has largely been addressed and sort of gets rid of that criticism of FGO. There'll still be people that will say, hey, yeah, but you have a shitty pity system, and that's fine. But ultimately, I think the reason that player retention maybe is a little bit down, the reason why it slumps some over time and why players just sort of come back for new shit and then leave again for other stuff, is because the main story is just exceedingly slow right now. If you actually look at this, guys, from JP, from Lost Belt 6 to Lost Belt 7, they went 1.5 years between main story chapters. Yeah, they work in 6.5. They work in, you know, stuff like Sea Monster Crisis, where they're at least story important events. But the actual bar doesn't move except at those main story chapters. That's the reason why they need to get that back to a better pace, even if that means shortening some of the stories some. I know Nasu's hard to wrangle and rein in, but he is taking way too long on some of these chapters, and I'm not going to fault him for trying to write a good story. I'm just merely going to say that whatever the bottleneck is there needs to be shortened, because we have gone from, you know, again, and I'm not saying we need to go back to this point, but from basically year 3, where we actually, I think it was year 4, where we got 3 lost belts in 1 year, to now we're not even guaranteed to get a lost belt a year. The average is a year and a half basically for this. That's a problem. So I think they really need to at least get it under a year. Maybe I think that sweet spot somewhere in the 8 to 6 month margin, that would be ideal for me. I don't think that's something they can achieve at this current point in time, but I would still like to see it at least get under a year. I think going more than a year without a main story chapter means that there's really not much to talk about for the community that year. I think that's what leads to people ultimately checking out other gacha games, is because they don't feel like that story that they care deeply about and are invested in is continuing. And I think the devs sit there and they look at all their metrics and realize how hard it is to get people through story. That's fine. I think they have all the tools necessary to allow people to kind of jump through story with blue prisms and stuff like that. In fact, I would argue, make those permanent. Make them a permanent addition to the mana prism shop. Don't let them expire, because that, even if it makes your story a joke and makes it easy, I've had other people say, hey, you can do a hard mode of story or something like that for achievement, for challenge completionists and stuff like that. That'd be fine. But I think allowing people to experience the story is one issue. Not giving them story to experience is a totally different issue. And that is something that I think they're seeing one of those issues and trying to address it. They're not really getting the other. So I hope that they address that, because right now, yeah, they get a failing grade on this one. So I understand the 0.5s and stuff like that and the purpose of them, but they've got to do better. They've got to move that bar forward and kind of get on with it a little bit. All right, now for what they can do for 2023, this one's going to be a little bit shorter because some of these are repeats from the last year that they still didn't address, like servant coins. So as we look forward, obviously that has to get addressed. This is issue number 1 in the community. I don't think you can make it past Annie 8 without the community rioting if you don't do something about this. There are people that love the 120 and pen systems, and again, if it's to serve as a new system to spend the player's time and to get them kind of still on that treadmill and still having something to work towards, it's failing because we don't have servant coins in a lot of cases. You can't get coins for a unit that doesn't have a banner right now, basically. You can't get coins if you're that free to play that can only roll the 1 copy, basically. And so you can get some, it's just not enough to actually allow the player to fulfill their goals at this point. I think that's the number 1 issue that we're having, is there's no point to a system that you can't participate in if you're a player. So this has to get addressed. This is issue number 1 for the game. Pity shouldn't reset. I still left this one on here. Like I said, I understand they addressed the 4-star. Still want to see this actually get some bells and whistles to it. Upgrade your pity system. Tout it as a big anniversary or New Year's upgrade, but do something. Try to help it. I think the 4-star adjustment does help some, but I want to see pity get better. And that doesn't necessarily mean the amount to hit pity. That means the way the system functions. FP should absolutely be faster to roll out. Again, I look forward to the day that this is the case, because God, I am so sick and tired of rolling out my FP. Quick needs more support options. Again, I still want to see this one get addressed. So this one is, like I said, I want to see more low stars. I maybe want to see a high rarity unit that, you know, is sort of like the Merlin type unit for Quick. I want to see that unit that's actually healing the party and tending to its survivability. Quick doesn't really have that right now. Mix and match ascensions and NP animations I left on here, but I think, again, there's numerous other issues that you could say that people want with customization, including more costumes and stuff like that. I think, again, with how much money this game makes, you can hire more animators. I understand hiring is a big issue for them right now. We know this because we've seen several interviews and paid attention to LaSingle's website. Although actually the last time I did check, it looks like they've hired some people. So hopefully that is not an issue anymore. But still, I think this is definitely something where it's like, get more animators in there, start doing more, start adding crazy stuff to the game that the game could honestly warrant. Maybe it's live 2D, maybe it's 3D stuff, maybe it's just more costumes. I don't care. Do something that makes people talk about FGO. Faux pas print acquisition, again, like I said, this one could actually just be quadrupled and it would be still okay. So I definitely want to see that, because I don't think that's serving a point right now. And then now we get to our first new one. Craft essence leveling needs quality of life. Have you ever leveled up a servant and you went up to the top right and just hit that like add all embers there button, that quick shortcut? That's great for leveling units. Do that for craft essences now. That would speed up craft essence bomb making, which is again sort of in tandem with the whole FP rolling out issue. Both of those are huge wastes of time. Allow us to actually make our craft essence bombs more efficiently. Not necessarily in terms of QP, because that wouldn't be the most QP efficient way, but at least in terms of time. Don't make it take so exorbitantly long to do the thing that you're trying to incentivize players to do by giving them a milestone. We know they want you to level your craft essences. Players often don't do it because they find the system confusing or convoluting or just time consuming. Actual account-based security options is still going to be an issue until it actually does get addressed. I think if they do address this, this can be a great thing for the future of FGO. One, people aren't losing their accounts nearly as often. Two, you can start doing stuff with like a website portal or something like that. And three, again, this could open up the door to other things like a PC client or something in the future if you did that. So I think this is a great idea. I don't know if Lasingle has the time or resources to devote to it just yet. The rate of unit upgrades needs to increase. You'll notice this actually replaced the issue where I was talking about, hey, upgrade the summer units and welfares, because the issue is now the entirety of your Chaldea. And the reason for this is because as time goes on, your servant roster is always expanding. They're always adding more units to the game. But in the meantime, the rate of upgrades hasn't really increased. It stayed roughly about the same from year to year. They've changed maybe where they give the upgrades, but not necessarily how many they give. And so this is an issue that I've looked at over time as like, hey, your roster is getting more and more bloated, but you're not keeping more and more of that roster up with the times. That's why we're starting to see, especially with 90++ content, I think this issue is really going to come to a head. Because with 90++ content, you seem to have 2 or 3 units that are kind of the go-to units for that node, versus 90+ or even 90 content where far more of the roster of that class was usable in the node. Now instead, we're only seeing a select few units that can do the content. That's an issue in my opinion. They desperately need to address it. You can't have your content sort of pricing out your player base. And I understand they have given us ways through the 90+ content by damage bonus, or again, damage bonus Cs or damage bonus units, but I don't think they're going to do that for every single one. In fact, we kind of saw that in the Lotto, and man, was that middle Lotto node really bad for people. Even had the JP fan base just screaming at them over it. So I really want to see them sort of start picking up the slack and sort of modernizing a lot of the roster and bringing them up to speed. I think that's an easy thing that they can do. If they need help, happy to help them, because I know exactly how to fix some of these units. Again, bond Cs need to be improved. We pretty much know this one's going to get addressed soon. We just don't know how. So that one is still on here, but it is what it is. This is another new one. Coin interface needs to be lockable. Have you ever done grail casting on JP? Man, do you hate the fact that you have to sit there and constantly be like, wait, is this an actual permanent unit, or is this a story locked or limited 3-star or lower unit? And so as a result of that, you're sitting there constantly trying to avoid the units like Coup Caster, like Gilderay Caster, like Mori for the Berserkers, where it's like, hey, I got that limited or story locked unit. I don't want to use their coins because I have no other way to get coins for them. That's kind of an issue. Granted, if this first one gets addressed, maybe that's no longer as big of an issue, but still I digress. I think the coin interface overall in grail casting needs to be a lot better, because it's just really cumbersome for how you sort and filter and lock things. Better interaction with the community is just, I don't think this one's ever going to leave the list as far as I'm concerned. I'd like to see them get better, but I think it's something that they can always get better at. And then again, rate of main story needs to be increased. This is just going to be a sticking point until they actually do it. I'm hoping though now, as we're through, or at least about to be through Lost Belt 7, that whatever comes next in FGO, whatever their goals are for a part 2.5 or a part 3, that starts heading in a more positive direction, a more interesting direction, a more quickly producible direction. But we'll see. I'm not saying that they need to just absolutely shill out story as fast as they can, but they definitely need to get a little bit faster than they have been. So again, I hope you guys enjoyed this. Let me know what you think FGO can work on. There's plenty of other stuff that I didn't include here, things that I know the community finds issue with. So let me know down in the comments below. I will see you guys for the next video. Have a good one.